Hi, I'm Jeff Ranke, Editorial Director of Manufacturing.net and Manufacturing Business Technology. Welcome to Security Breach. About a month ago, we had Kevin Kumpf from Cyolo on the program to discuss secure remote access and the cybersecurity challenges it can present. It was one of our best episodes, so I'd highly recommend checking it out in the archives if you missed it. While we covered several topics in that episode that emanated from a recent Cyolo report, there were some stats that we sort of glossed over. Specifically, the company identified a lack of visibility, insufficient user education and training, and weak access control as the top 3 cybersecurity deficiencies currently facing Cyolo's industrial customers. All of these were referenced by more than 50% of those who responded to their survey. Cyolo also reported on the most highly implemented solutions, which survey respondents identified as defense in depth, network segmentation, and multi-factor authentication. Now, all the problems and solutions identified by Cyolo's report have been discussed here on Security Breach, but often by firms focused solely on mitigating risk for others. One of the most important things I've learned in my time writing and reporting on U.S. manufacturing is that it's not only what you ask, but to whom you address the questions. Today's guest offers a unique perspective in that he needs to ensure the OT environment of a global manufacturing footprint has the visibility needed to stay secure and ward off attacks, while also working with customers around the world to ensure they are protecting vital assets that have never been more heavily targeted. It's my pleasure to introduce Matthew Kosnick, Senior Business Development Manager of OT Cybersecurity Services at Eaton, a leading supplier and manufacturer of motion control and power management systems and components. Matt, thanks so much for joining us today, and welcome to Security Breach. So one of the things I like to do, we've had some folks from Siemens and Rockwell and a couple of other manufacturers on, and you guys are in kind of a unique position in that you have this huge global manufacturing footprint to keep secure. You're also working with a lot of manufacturers with all the products and services that you offer. So it's always interesting to get your perspective on something when it comes to the vulnerabilities that are really hitting manufacturing so hard right now. Is there a couple things that you can kind of pinpoint and look at and saying, these are sort of what's highest on our priority list right now, and both internally as well as working with customers from a cybersecurity perspective?
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. When I look at vulnerabilities, or when we look at vulnerabilities at Eaton, we tend to focus around what could be impacting the industry. And really, it's broad. We certainly look at the digital transformation, and as things become more connected, to be a vulnerability in of itself. So as things become more connected, you obviously make your exposure to potential attacks to be broader. And along with that, when you're going through this digital transformation, you also have legacy systems that now you need to take a look at that could potentially be obsolete. So those are 2 huge things that we focus in on. Obviously, you can get into the details of specific vulnerabilities, but those 2 broad concepts to us are where we think the industry needs to be paying a lot of attention to.
Yeah. So over time, we've seen, obviously, we've been talking about IoT and Industry 4.0 for a decade or more. But over the last couple of years is when we've really seen cybersecurity really become much more of a priority because there's been more attacks. You can blame the pandemic. You can blame some of the things you just referenced in terms of new technology connecting to legacy systems, whatever the case may be. What do you think has really been driving the most change over the last couple of years? When we talked about cybersecurity in 2019 even versus today, it's 180 degrees different. Is it just all those connection points? Is it more awareness? What do you think has been the biggest thing driving the changes in perspective?
Yeah, it's probably a couple different things. It's certainly that digital transformation that we talked about, that increased exposure that many industries now have to deal with. I also think it's awareness. Things are propagating in the news. It's not uncommon now to go to your favorite news outlet and see cybersecurity to be on the front page. So I think it's a lot of awareness and seeing the impact that, good or bad cybersecurity posture could have on an industry. So I think customers are taking a look at that. And so like at Eaton, that's one of the main things that we try to focus on is not only, hey, there's this great technology that's out there that we could provide or anyone can provide at this point, but it's really about focusing on that awareness. Are your people aware? Yeah. We could talk all about the technology that might be deployed, but if your people aren't equipped to use that technology or aren't aware of the potential vulnerabilities that they may face on a daily basis, you could leave yourself exposed. Similarly, it's about the processes. To have consistent processes that you can go back to and build cybersecurity into your culture so that it's not this hey, I'm going to add on something and I need to do cybersecurity as additional to my daily work. But if it's ingrained into what you do, then it makes it that much easier. And I think of it kind of like safety. I think about where safety has come, and the more we can look at cybersecurity through a similar lens that we do safety, I think we're really equipping our organizations to be successful. And that's one of the areas that we can focus, as you mentioned, as we look at this growing trend, this growing awareness, and this growing focus around cybersecurity.
Well, anybody who's listened to this program knows I'm going to jump all over the transparency comment, because that's one of the things I get on my soapbox about a little bit. I don't think we share enough information in the industrial sector. I think you see in other areas, healthcare, finance, they seem to really share a lot of that data about these attacks to help everybody become better defended. On the industrial side, it doesn't feel like we're doing a lot of that. It doesn't feel like we're pushing each other enough to share this information. It almost becomes a competitive advantage, if you will. I'd kind of like to get your thoughts there. I mean, you work with so many different manufacturers, with so many different partners. What do you, maybe you feel like we are doing a good job, or are there things we could do better, or what are your thoughts there and just on sharing more information about attacks?
But you can always do more, right? So, I mean, you can look across anything and say, hey, you can be doing more. I do think, the industry has certainly grown a lot from where it was, like you mentioned, a decade or so ago, and how it's grown. I do think that sometimes OT cybersecurity doesn't always get the press that the other maybe cybersecurity focuses do, but we certainly have an opportunity to do more. There's a lot of focus in the IT space. There's a lot of focus in these adjacent spaces, but looking at OT cybersecurity and the OT environment the same way we do some of these adjacent spaces is critical. So to your point, it's, can we do more? Certainly, Eaton and others are focused tremendously on, hey, how can we bring these technology to the market? How can we be educating our people? How can we be bringing processes to the forefront? But it really does take everyone involved, including end users, including owners of critical infrastructure or these industries that we focus on, to be making cybersecurity an element that we focus on. So to your point, I do think we have an opportunity to do better. We always do. But I do think we're trending in the right direction.
I'd agree. I'd say even in the last 18 months, the dialogue has gotten a lot better. There's a lot of industry groups, a lot of consortiums popping up to share this type of information, even if it's Eaton and Rockwell or Siemens or whoever the case may be. I think there has been a lot of improvement there. I would agree. You also touched on some things about cybersecurity as a cultural element. I thought that was a great point, and that's something we talk a lot about here on the show. How do we get there? I know that's kind of a loaded question, and it's not a simple one. There's no silver bullet there. But what are some things maybe you've seen in working with manufacturers that has helped really impress upon workers the role that they play in enterprise-wide cybersecurity?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do think I would key on, a couple things. One, I have seen companies benefit tremendously by partnerships. We just talked about sharing information, being more transparent. And it's one of those cases where the more you can bring experts to the table, whether it's a partner, whether it's, a supplier, whether it's a vendor, you're setting yourself up for success because you're getting that additional perspective and you're bringing in the expertise that other industries or other companies or even other industries can bring to the table. So I do think the more we can partner together, whether that is, a plant or a factory, and partnering with a subject matter expert to bring that perspective, I think you're better equipped to make cybersecurity part of the culture because you're going to get help there. The other thing is training. So we focus a lot on training here at Eaton. There's the awareness piece, but you also need to be intentional about that. So adopting industry best practices and weaving that into your training curriculum, whether that's annual reoccurring training or whether that's just simple awareness-based training where you're providing updates to your staff to make sure that they're aware of the latest and greatest trends, the vulnerabilities that may be happening, and they're best equipped to be able to address that today. I think those are a couple elements that are important there.
I think it's interesting too. One of the things you kept talking about was expertise, and obviously it's vital in any particular area where you're trying to train and do better. But it seems like on the OT side, OT security in particular, where there's a real skills gap. I mean, there is throughout manufacturing, but in particular in OT security. We try to take some of those IT approaches and cut and paste them over, doesn't always go so great. What have you seen in terms of either developing those skill sets internally, working outside the enterprise, and really trying to develop somebody with that OT security expertise to safeguard some of these systems? Because the threat landscape is getting so much bigger every single day, every time you add some other connection point. Is there something maybe you've seen or feel like manufacturing could do to really start to grow more of that OT expertise?
Yeah, that expertise is a little bit of a unicorn to me. So finding someone that has the OT, or finding a group or people that have that OT expertise and then can also pair that with cybersecurity expertise. I do think that's a bit rare, but I do think it's necessary. You certainly want the cybersecurity expertise so that you can position your company to protect the most critical assets, but you also need to bring in that OT expertise, that operational expertise, because at the end of the day, we're really focused on efficiency, reliability, resiliency of our system. Cybersecurity is great as long as the outcome of that is those things that I mentioned. So it's really bringing in folks that have that mindset. And, that's one of the areas where we do focus on at Eaton. We're not doing cybersecurity for the sake of it, for the sake of just doing cybersecurity. There needs to be an outcome to that. So we do need to be focused on, hey, we're doing cybersecurity because it is going to help make our facilities be more reliable, be more resilient, be more safe, have better quality. If we look at it through that lens, then we're going to be best equipped to drive that forward. But you really do need to be, identifying people that have those two elements, that OT cybersecurity and that operational knowledge. And you do need to be partnering with organizations that can also bring that. So again, one of the areas that we focus on here at Eaton, it's a great question, and it's something that I'm hoping that the industry is adopting more of. It's easy to try and do it by ourselves, but oftentimes, having good elements, good partners, good people that can bring all of that together for us equips us to address the cybersecurity concerns that a lot of people have.
Yeah. I know a lot of our audience is going to be in that probably small to mid-sized manufacturing sort of category. And a lot of times what we're seeing is the plant manager, the IT, the OT folks, they understand cybersecurity, but pushing that up the food chain, so to speak, and making that a priority throughout the organization can be very, very difficult. What advice or perspective could you offer in terms of really trying to bring that home to the people that control the purse strings in terms of understanding all the stuff you just talked about? Because I agree with you 100%. How do we get them to change that mindset and make it a greater priority?
Great question. It's interesting for me that you looked at it from the bottom up. I tie it back to my previous comment that I look at cybersecurity in a lot of the same ways that I do safety. And if you think about safety, that is a top-down approach. That is management realizing that safety is important and pushing that down and making it part of their culture. Everyone has a responsibility for cybersecurity, so don't get me wrong there. So the bottom approach isn't necessarily wrong, but I think we do need to be approaching it from both angles. So you can provide the training, you can provide the awareness that I think builds that maybe bottom-up approach where cybersecurity is getting pushed up and from the factories, from the manufacturing. But then you also have to have this bottom down or top-down approach where management is making sure and has a vested interest in making sure the manufacturing facilities are adopting those smart cybersecurity practices that are resulting in all those things that we've mentioned.
Yeah, I love the analogy to safety. We've been talking about that a lot in the stuff we've written and put on the site and stuff like that as well. It all does bleed together. I think that's a great way, potentially as a sales tool, if you need to sell it internally, that is, in terms of how to make cybersecurity a greater priority in some of these organizations. One of the things that's interesting too, from your perspective, Eaton works with industry or with facilities, companies of all sizes, large aerospace manufacturers, maybe down to the smallest dairy processor, if you will. What have you seen in terms of some of the differences in grabbing on to a lot of the cybersecurity strategies that we're trying to get out there based on company size? We tend to lean sort of the bigger guys are going to grab onto it first. Has that been the case? Has there been resistance from some smaller manufacturers, or what have you seen?
Yeah, I love that question. I'm not sure that I can speak to it in terms of segmenting it the way you did, but I can answer it this way. The OT environment is extremely heterogeneous. I think we tend to look at it as, it's just the quote unquote OT environment. But when you work with individual factories, manufacturers, customers, even within those same segments that you just laid out, it's very different. So, you could look at a mid-sized company today, and then next week we could be helping another mid-sized company, and the goals, the objectives look very different. The vulnerabilities may look very different. So it is really important to be looking at all of that through the lens of each situation is unique. Now, we would go through a similar template to be able to do an evaluation, to be able to take a look at, hey, what are the things we need to do? But I think we need to recognize that they're unique. Now, the follow-on to that would be, okay, well, then what do you do? And I do think, the assess, remediate, and that life cycle process is extremely important. At the beginning, we talked about the digital transformation. That is not slowing down. So as that moves forward, that assess and remediate cycle becomes extremely important. And to me, there's a couple elements in the assessment piece that I think are simple, but can be easily overlooked. One is know what you have. So that assessment can help you look into your environment and say, hey, what exactly do I have here so that I know what it is I need to do? And you could say that's not even just from a cybersecurity perspective, but just knowing what you have is a best practice. Let's say you do want to go through some digital transformation. To do that, you should know what you have. So that assess piece is critical. And then understanding how things are connected together. So knowing what you have, knowing how they're connected together are two huge steps that we can be taking. And then that remediation and prioritizing, hey, based on my unique situation, based on my goals as a factory, as a manufacturer, what is it that I need to do and prioritize? Because the reality is you're not going to be able to do everything. So knowing what you have and what are the key priorities that you can go through and know what you maybe need to accomplish in the short term, midterm, and long term, I think that's all huge.
No, I love how you kind of laid that out there. It doesn't have to be initially just starting out with all of these huge defensive softwares and all the different penetration testing or other things that you want to get to eventually, definitely. But start with some of those different things when it's just taking inventory of your API connections or your endpoints or whatever the case may be. I think that's great advice. Kind of building off of that response, Matt, I'd love to talk to you a little bit about secure by design. Eaton has a lot of different power management and different types of components that follow that IoT, that Industry 4.0 genre, and they're plugging into a lot of legacy systems. That can create maybe a false sense of security if Eaton or anybody is saying, hey, we're secure here. What you're plugging in, our new piece of equipment, our new component is secure, but we don't know about what they're plugging it into. I think sometimes on the plant floor, they think we're good because we got this new stuff going here. Maybe you can talk us through a little bit on working through, yeah, it's great this new stuff is secure, but you got to take care of the old stuff too.
Yeah. We look at this at Eaton in a couple of different ways. Secure by design, and of course we are big adopters of that because that is a huge component of overall cybersecurity posture. But there's also this concept of secure commissioning and secure ecosystems. So as you take this secure device and you put it into this environment where it's now all of a sudden exposed and connected to any number of other things, what does that ecosystem look like? What does that network look like? And so that's we take this approach that, of course, we're going to offer things secure by design, and we have development practices and our development teams and our cybersecurity centers of excellence are certainly focused on that. But it's also this idea of once it gets installed, how are you installing it? This idea of secure commissioning. When I connect this smart device to a switch, let's say, how does that look? How is that switch exposed? Does it have open ports? Are there ports that I can potentially lock down there? And if someone maybe compromises that switch, is my now secure by design device exposed? Because secure by design is oftentimes dependent on authentication and trust. But if I've compromised a device and I've established that trust, then it's potentially possible to compromise that secure by design device. So we do look at it from a multi-pronged approach. The secure by design is extremely important. It is. But taking it a step further and looking at that, hey, how am I securing that ecosystem? Do I have secure commissioning practices in place that when I inject it in there, I'm securing it? And then I'll add one more. There's also the concept of ongoing lifecycle maintenance. Because once we install that device in the environment, cybersecurity is not done. It's not a destination that we get to and then we shake our hands and say, okay, I'm secure. It is a journey and it is an ongoing process. As systems evolve, as configuration changes happen, as we introduce more equipment, we constantly need to be looking back at that system and saying, hey, are there new vulnerabilities that I need to take a look at? Are there new systems that now are obsolete because of this new technology that I've introduced? And making sure that we're taking a look at the ecosystem as a whole so that when we do install these secure by design devices, the entire system is safe and reliable.
No, great points. Couldn't agree more with everything you just said there. I'm curious too, as we're kind of going through a lot of these different dynamics of cybersecurity in the OT environment. With a company like Eaton, how much do you think you're able to borrow from your own facilities, your own manufacturing operations, and translate to a lot of things that you're offering to the customer?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, we look at it this way. The solutions, the services, the products that we're offering the customers and the way we deploy that, we look at it as if we're deploying it in our own systems in our own plants. Yeah. So the way we deploy cybersecurity and the way we look at cybersecurity in our own facilities is the exact same way that we're partnering with our customers. Now, it might look a little bit different, right? Because Eaton's goals, objectives, and the things we may face every day may look slightly different than what a customer in a particular industry may deal with. You can think data center, manufacturing, things like that. But at the end of the day, those same practices, those same principles that we would adopt here, we're sharing that with our customers, and that bleeds through in our services. It bleeds through in our products. It bleeds through in the training we may offer and our conversations that we might have with them.
Yeah, if you're looking to implement a new SOP when bringing on these new devices, you want to make sure everybody's on board so we're not doing it differently in different facilities or even different parts of the plant. What can you do to lay out that procedure to make sure we're taking advantage of the secure by design elements of the new device when you're connecting it to legacy systems?
Well, first off, I would partner with the OEM. So wherever you're buying your devices from, I would make sure you're partnering with the OEM because they'll know that device that's getting installed better than anybody. So partner with your OEM and make sure that they are part of that process. A lot of times what happens is that, customers may have a team that does cybersecurity, or they may have an IT team that might look at this, or they may say, hey, this is part of a larger project and I have, someone else that's taking a look at cybersecurity. But the reality is any of those entities are not going to understand the device and the ecosystem that it should exist in better than the OEM. So if you're looking at it from a procedural perspective, I would say go back to the OEM and make sure you're adopting their best practices and they're able to take a look at your ecosystem and advise how that device is being installed. Now, we could go through the typical procedural things. Those certainly exist. You certainly want to look at authentication. You'd certainly want to look at patch management. I could rattle more and more and more, but that would get boring. But I think it's more important to simplify it for a customer and simplify it for an end user. It's hey, take a look at who the OEM is and make sure that as you're deploying that device into an ecosystem, it's in alignment with what their best practices may call for.
Yeah. I just wanted to go back and reiterate that because I think in the past, pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, that's when manufacturing started getting hit so hard with ransomware attacks and malware attacks and everything else. Prior to that, a lot of the common speak was, man, I just want plug and play. Put it in and I can get going, no downtime, minimal adjustments to my operations. We just need to take that extra step and make sure everything is connected and secure now before we just plug and play. So I think you kind of laid that out well.
Yeah, it should be part of our processes. So anytime you're installing a new piece of equipment, we're very good at, the general commissioning. Like, hey, I'm going to commission this device. I'm going to configure it so that it operates the way I want to. But, there's that step, if commissioning is 1A, general commissioning, there's 1B, which is the secure commissioning, which is, okay, it works the way I want to, but is it working in a secure manner? So, you could certainly integrate that into the commissioning steps themselves, or you could look at it kind of as a 1B. I think there's value to the 1B approach just because sometimes it does require a different set of expertise. The people that may generally configure the device may not always have the very detailed expertise that's required to make sure that it's secure in that environment. So that's why we may look at it like a 1A and a 1B approach whenever we're doing commissioning.
Okay. No, great points. So, Matt, got to ask everybody who's coming on now, the big question, of course, is artificial intelligence. How is AI going to be impacting cybersecurity? I think there's definitely things to be worried about, but I think there's some good news out there, too, for the white hats in terms of how we can use this as a new tool. I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, it seems like every day I hear about and read about and use ChatGPT, and we kind of take a look at all these new AI tools that are out there, and everyone's trying to figure out, hey, how is this going to integrate into everyday life? There are the pros and the cons. Certainly, when we look at it from a white hat approach, AI is tremendously well positioned to crunch through data, to look at trends, to go through analytics, and to identify anomalies way faster than a human being could. But at the same time, it does give the black hats an opportunity to make the, ransomware or phishing attacks and, social engineering attacks far more sophisticated than a human being could. So it is this kind of arms race that's going on between, the white hats and the black hats to say who can get ahead. The reality is AI is and should be a part of what we're looking at because there is a tremendous impact for good. And the reality is the black hats are going to use it. I do think it points to this need to get back to the basics, though. At the very beginning, we talked about focusing on the people, the processes, the technology. And AI certainly falls into that technology approach. But AI is going to evolve quickly. The digital transformation is going to evolve quickly. And so it is really important to have those processes in place and the daily things that we would go to make sure that our people are equipped to deal with whatever may happen tomorrow. I think predicting what tomorrow is going to look like and what AI is going to look like is tremendously difficult. So it is about getting back to the basics, and it's easy to overlook the basics and get really excited about the shiny new objects. But for me, the basics are sometimes the best way to make sure that we're equipping ourselves for a successful tomorrow.
No, agree with you 100%. Any other trends you're seeing out there right now, Matt? Anything else we should really be aware of, whether it's a new tool, a new type of attack, anything like that you see kind of maybe short and long-term impacts on cybersecurity?
Yeah, so, we talked a little bit about legacy systems, and, there's a lot of great tools out there. We've partnered with Tenable to do network detection and threat detection from a network perspective. And those are really nice technologies that allow you to visualize network traffic and detect whether that traffic is anonymous or is potentially malicious. So these technologies do leverage a lot of times some form of artificial intelligence because they can look at trends. They can see the way your operations is working under normal conditions, and then they can see, hey, you're starting to get away from that. And when we think about legacy devices, it's hard to deploy down new technologies because a lot of times they're just incompatible. But these network detection tools can kind of cover part of that gap. And while you might not be able to deploy technologies on that legacy device, you can at least see the communication and the traffic that is egress and ingress from it. And you can kind of analyze that to potentially discover, hey, do I have something that could be malicious here that I need to take a look at? So that's probably one other trend that I've seen really rise over the last couple of years. And I think I think it does fall back on this idea of legacy devices that everyone's trying to figure out, hey, how do I deal with these things that may still be in my environment that I might not have an immediate plan to address?
No, I think that's great. I mean, we always talk about OT environment invisibility. Seeing what's going on within that OT environment is a huge challenge right now. A lot of companies, a lot of manufacturers are just not set up well to see everything that's going on. Definitely goes back to what you talked about before, though, and conducting that inventory and understanding all those connection points, all those API calls, and everything else that's going on there. Fits together nicely. Deviating a little bit from what we've been talking about here, when I think about Eaton, really, I know you guys are in every type of manufacturing facility, but also a lot of what we would call critical infrastructure. When we look at power plants, water treatment facilities, all of that type of those types of environments. And what we're seeing is a lot of state-backed hacking groups really target those types of operating environments, those types of industrial control systems. They say it's more of a political element. but it's impacting people on a very social level. I'm just curious, from somebody with the footprint that Eaton has, have you guys seen an uptick in this type of attack? Have you made any types of adjustments or strategies focused on some of these types of things that are going on?
Well, Eaton's been doing intelligent power management for 100 years now, so certainly we've seen a lot of things, and we've seen the trends take place over time. One of the things that I think we've done, at least internally, is develop and equip our teams to be able to look at cybersecurity on a day-to-day basis. So I had mentioned earlier, we have centers of excellence, and one of those is cybersecurity, and that is to increase the focus on cybersecurity so that there is a team that is thinking about cybersecurity 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's all we do. Yeah. But then, when we think about, hey, what does that mean for a customer? What does that mean for an end user? There's a tremendous opportunity to be sharing that knowledge. So, whether it's a nation state actor or whether it's, some one-off group that's trying to take advantage of critical infrastructure, the more we can be sharing information and the more we can be taking, hey, what is it that we have learned as an OEM, as a vendor, and being able to share that with customers, that's tremendous. And that typically will show up in, a lot of the things we've talked about today, whether it's the secure commissioning, whether it's the training, whether it's the awareness programs, whether it's just, generally speaking, having conversations where we can be sharing best practices and things that we're learning. That's going to help equip us to meet the challenges of the nation states that may be trying to do bad stuff, or like I said, the small groups that may be trying to, use ransomware to make a quick buck.
No. Leading by example is really what you're talking about there, and that's great to hear from one of the biggest industrial companies in the world, that you're taking a lot of those small steps and building that into bigger strategies that we can all take advantage of. So that's great to hear. I'm super proud of Security Breach and the things that we talk about here. Really appreciate you coming on again, Matt. One of the things when I talk to my colleagues or my family or anything about what the stuff that we discuss on the program, they want to know how I can sleep at night now that I'm learning all of these different things that are out there and what all the stuff the bad guys are doing. So I'll turn that around on you a little bit. Knowing everything you do, how do you sleep at night? What gives you some resolve or some peace of mind when it comes to looking at cybersecurity?
Yeah, there's a long way to go. But on the very flip side of that coin is we've also come a long way as an industry. So that gives me a lot of confidence when I lay my head down, knowing that while there are tremendous challenges out there and there's a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done, we've come a long, long way. And that gives me a lot of confidence. And I have no doubt that the industry can get there and we can get there together. So that's how I think about cybersecurity. I can't say that there aren't nights where I go to sleep super soundly because you read sometimes what's happening in the news and you think, oh my gosh, what's the ripple effect of this? But I think that's normal. I think because people that are in our positions, and certainly at Eaton, we care about it. We care about it tremendously, and it does. Frankly, it does sometimes keep us up at night.
To catch up on past episodes, you can go to manufacturing.net, IEN.com, or mbtmag.com. You can also check Security Breach out wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple, Amazon, and Overcast. And if you have a cybersecurity story or topic that you'd like to have us explore on Security Breach, you can reach me at jeff@ien.com. For Matt Kosnick, I'm Jeff Ranke, and this is Security Breach.